The first person to mistake Evelyn Hart for staff was a florist. "Could you put these near the entrance?" the woman asked, handing her a box of candles without hesitation. Evelyn accepted them automatically. It was easier than explaining herself. The engagement party was being held in a converted hotel ballroom overlooking the harbor, all pale gold lighting and floating jazz music. Daniel had said he wanted something clean and modern. What he meant, Evelyn suspected, was expensive enough to impress people he still feared disappointing. She arrived early because he'd called 3 nights earlier asking if she could help things stay organized. Not host, not celebrate. Help. At 62, she had become accustomed to being useful in ways that erased her. She arranged place cards while event staff hurried around her. One waiter asked if she needed an apron. Another pointed toward the kitchen when a tray arrived. By the third mistake, she simply smiled. Daniel appeared 40 minutes before guests arrived, already half inside another conversation through his wireless earpiece. "Mom, thank God," he said, kissing the air near her cheek. "Can you keep an eye on the champagne situation?" "They're behind." Then he disappeared again. No pause long enough to actually see her. Evelyn stood still for a moment after he left. When Daniel was 10, he used to panic before school presentations. He'd sit at the kitchen table, unable to swallow breakfast while she rehearsed speeches with him before sunrise. Back then, he looked at her like she anchored the earth itself. People change gradually enough that you rarely notice the exact day. Respect becomes convenience. The guests arrived in polished waves. Young attorneys, startup founders, men with careful watches, and women who carried themselves like they'd been photographed professionally before learning how to relax. Daniel moved through them beautifully. That was the difficult part. He was charming, warm, effortless in public. Evelyn watched him become someone increasingly admired by people who had no idea who paid for his first apartment after college when his business failed. No idea who refinanced her own home to keep him afloat after 32. The lie had never been spoken directly, only edited carefully over time. Claire found Evelyn near the bar about an hour into the evening. "You look beautiful," Claire said sincerely. She did. Claire always spoke directly, which Evelyn appreciated. No performance around her. "You seem nervous," Evelyn replied. Claire laughed softly. "I'm marrying a man who treats relaxation like a security risk." That sounds like Daniel. For a moment they stood comfortably together watching guests gather near the windows. Then it happened. Small enough that most people forgot it immediately. A gray-haired man approached Daniel with 2 others beside him. "And who's this?" he asked, glancing toward Evelyn. Daniel barely looked over. "Oh," he said lightly, "she basically runs my life. I'd collapse without my housekeeper." The group laughed politely. One woman nodded toward Evelyn. "You must have stories." Evelyn smiled. Not because it was funny. Because the alternative would require surviving humiliation publicly, and she no longer had the energy for scenes. Claire's face changed first. Not outrage, recognition, like someone hearing a crack inside a wall they'd assumed was solid. Daniel was already moving on, steering the conversation toward investment projections and wedding venues in Italy. The moment dissolved around everyone except the 3 people trapped inside it. Claire touched Evelyn's arm gently. "I'm so sorry. It's all right," Evelyn said, and because dignity sometimes looks absurd from the outside, she picked up an abandoned wine glass and carried it toward the service station. The rest of the evening unfolded through a strange emotional distance. People continued mistaking her role because Daniel had defined it for them. One guest asked how long she'd worked for the family. Another asked if Claire planned to keep her on after the wedding. Evelyn answered calmly enough that even she frightened herself. Near dessert service, she overheard 2 men discussing estate structures and property transfers. One worked in tax law. Normally, she would have tuned it out. Instead, she listened carefully. Daniel eventually noticed Claire becoming quieter. "You okay?" he asked her near the balcony doors. "You introduced your mother as your housekeeper." He blinked once. "Oh, come on, it was a joke." Claire stared at him. "I don't think your mother heard it as one. She knows how I meant it." But there it was again. Meaning instead of impact. Convenience instead of acknowledgement. Claire looked across the room toward Evelyn, who was helping an elderly guest carry a plate to a table, because apparently she could not stop serving people even now. "You should talk to her," Claire said. Daniel glanced over distractedly. "I will." He didn't. By midnight the party dissolved into tired embraces and chauffeured departures. Evelyn left quietly with her longtime friend Marianne, who had attended just long enough to witness enough. Neither woman spoke for the first 10 minutes of the drive. City lights slid silently across the windshield. Then Evelyn removed her heels, leaned back carefully, and said, "Can I use your phone charger?" Marianne handed it over without asking why. Evelyn called her accountant. Not angrily, not emotionally. "Martin," she said after he answered, "I need to review my estate documents tomorrow." A pause. "All right. And I'd like Daniel's access removed from the harbor account immediately." Another pause this time. Longer. "I wondered when you might revisit that arrangement," Martin said quietly. That sentence settled deeper than the humiliation itself, because it meant other people had noticed long before she allowed herself to. Over the next 3 weeks, Daniel encountered consequences in pieces. A transfer request declined, a property document requiring revised signatures, an assistant informing him that a commercial unit he referenced publicly was still majority owned by Evelyn. He called irritated first. "Mom, what is going on? You should speak with Martin. Why are you changing things suddenly?" Suddenly. Evelyn almost smiled at the word. Nothing changed suddenly, Daniel. The silence afterward stretched too long. For the first time in years, he sounded young again, not powerful, just uncertain. Claire visited Evelyn alone one rainy afternoon, carrying bakery boxes neither of them touched. "He keeps saying he didn't mean anything by it," Claire admitted. Evelyn nodded slowly. "I believe him." Claire looked confused. "That's the problem," Evelyn said softly. "He stopped understanding the difference between affection and respect a very long time ago." Months later, at a smaller dinner gathering after the wedding plans resumed, Claire welcomed guests at their apartment door. When Evelyn arrived, Claire smiled warmly and said, "This is Daniel's mother, Evelyn Hart." Nothing else. No qualifications. No minimization. Just truth placed carefully back where it belonged. Daniel stood nearby holding 2 wine glasses. For once, he looked unable to hide from the sound of his own silence. Evelyn took the glass he offered. Not triumphant, not healed entirely, but no longer invisible.